I'm back. I'm so happy to be back. Well, a week, as we predicted, is such a long time in Trump land. So we've had the stock market have a wobble. Yes, the first of a few. We also had the memo, the fucking memo. Are we not over the memo? So it was finally released in a blaze of froth and nonsense. And now we have to sit through and wait the 11-page rebuttal from the Democrats. So that's gone on. But that got me thinking, what was I going to do as my comeback video? And I thought about it, and I thought, Devin NUNES, yes, so he's integral to the memo, but he also escaped that scandal last year about the unmasking of who was being tapped, and it was really looking as if he was on the brink of resigning, and then he hung in. So I thought, how compromised is NUNES? Yes, but I think a more important question is Trump going to fire, not Sessions, who's he going to fire? Rosenstein. Because if he does, that's a turning point. And should these current Republicans not get up in arms about that, if they let that go, that is a serious departure from traditional republicanism. And that got me thinking generally about the state of the Republicans and who are they now, you know. So this is going to be a two-parter. First of all on NUNES, and the second one is, will Rosenstein be sacked and the implications of that should that happen. But before, there's a few questions raised by viewers. One is, was the new third, fourth generation Kennedy who came and gave the response to the State of the Union Yawnathon, is he the new front for the Democratic Party? In my political opinion, not my tarot opinion, I can do a reading on it for you sometime, I don't think so. I hope not. You know how I feel about dynasties. You know, no. Please don't go down the dynastic trap. So that was one of the questions that popped up. Thank you all once again for your comments, because I always learn so much. And I'm very pleased always to open my computer in the morning because of the time lapse and see such wonderful, thoughtful, funny comments. So thank you all once again. So here we go with this particular reading. So to distill the question, is NUNES compromised? There's talk that somebody's got something on NUNES. He could just be a loose cannon. He could just be one of those goody two-shoes guys who was like the hall monitor at school who just wants to get into Trump's good books. I mean, it might be as simple as that. He's just personally ambitious and decided to go this way. But there is more and more talk that he's in somebody's pocket. And I think, given that he was always someone looking for the fast track, it wouldn't surprise me if there was some muck behind the scenes. So my question for the first part of this reading is NUNES compromised? Okay. Is Devin NUNES compromised? Is NUNES compromised? Is NUNES compromised? Okay, so I'm going to do a 7-card reading for this and see what it reveals, and we may need to go a bit further. All right, NUNES. Interesting. All right, so So let me show you what's come up here. This is one of my nighttime lounge room readings, and I don't know, because of the weird lighting, how well you see the cards, so I'll just hold them to the screen. The Ace of Cups. Okay, remember, always aces represent a fundamental powerhouse of energy, and they represent the energy in a quintessential form for whatever suit is being discussed. In this case, the emotional, intuitive cups. Now, this is a very bountiful card. When it comes up in normal readings, someone is getting all the good things in life and are emotionally satisfied with what's going on in their lives. And it's an abundance of joy and happiness. So as his essential signifying card, I'm going to accept that. And I think in a general sense, NUNES, despite the stresses and strains he's been under, really feels he's made it. I don't know about his childhood, I don't know about his teenage years, but he really feels he's made it to the big time in the position he's in. For someone who's still, you know, relatively young, I would say also radically immature, but that's just me. But he has got the cups. There is a risk with cups, which we've seen before, particularly the Ace of Cups, which is an overflow of emotions, being overwhelmed by emotions. And this could be the warning aspect. Cards hold sort of premonition type qualities, but they also contain warnings. And if he's driven too much by his emotions, it could be to his detriment. And one of the reasons I say that in his recent past is the Five of Pentacles, cast out in the cold. So I think what has happened is, by recent past we'd be looking at the scandal of last year and so forth. He was on the brink of being cast out. His whole political career was almost ended last year in his recent past, but he fought through with the Page of Swords, which is youthful masculine energy. I think he's probably quite charming in a face-to-face encounter. You know, if you met him in a sports bar, you could probably have a good rave with NUNES. So I think his charm, and to a certain extent his mercurial communication properties, have worked in his favour to keep him in the job. So we move to his current column now. And if you think back to what I was just saying a minute ago about being out in the cold, he was still at risk of having to walk away, but he's managed to employ his inner manipulator and to keep juggling his position. Now my question was, is Noonan compromised? In other words, has someone, whether it's Russians or a businessman who bankrolled him in the early days of his career, he owes somebody something. And so on one level, this could also indicate that he was going to be moving away from his job, which would have left him in debt to that person, or it could have been Russia. But he could also be being manipulated. So this is the card of the manipulator. And so I'm leaving it as ambiguous. I think he's done some manipulating to stay in his position. But I think he also is, in answer to that question, being manipulated. In other words, he has to juggle very fast, or he owes somebody something that he wouldn't be able to repay, and you wouldn't want to be in that position. Now, these dirty dealings, it's not as though Republicans and even Democrats and lots of political players haven't got grubby financial histories and owe certain donor powers and so forth. Of course, they all do. So it's not unique to one bent Republican. But the problem for them, particularly the Republicans, is Mullah, whose job it is to follow the money. So these things they routinely get away with. You know, offering tenders to big companies where you secretly own a huge proportion of the shares, or, you know, these deals of high capitalism that have been going on for generations. Normal behaviour, business protecting itself, politicians protecting and advancing big business interests over the people. All these normal things are now being followed through the Mueller investigation. And the reason I am harping on about that in relation to Devin Nunes is his next two cards. They are, may as well look at them together, the Hierophant and Judgment. So the Hierophant representing the system, not only the system of moral and social laws and norms, but the legal system, the very foundation of the country. We're talking the constitutional stuff is represented by the Hierophant and by the implacable Mullah. And he's got the Judgment card. So my interpretation of the question, is Nunes compromised? Is that why he's doing all this crazy, loud stuff that doesn't, it's not really well thought out. It's a bit desperate. I think this is exactly what's going on. And I think Mullah and his team, which is vast, is going to find the dirt on Nunes as well. And none of us will know really how deep this goes into the Republican Party. So it's quite fascinating. All right then, trendsetters, I'm going to put these cards back now in the pack, because although I think Devin Nunes' days are seriously numbered, I don't think the question is as profoundly interesting. Is Trump going to fire Rosenstein? Oh, sorry, let me do this. So, I'll just change my shuffle technique here, giving them a good mix up before we move on. Now, of course, Trump would love to fire this man because he's holding him back from firing Mueller, and he has to go through Rosenstein in order to have any impact on what Mueller's doing. Certain numbers of the Republicans, of course, have said, oh, we'll never let this happen on our watch. That is a bridge too far. We'll tolerate most things, but we wouldn't tolerate that. Really? They're perfectly capable of just sticking their fingers in their ears, I think, and letting it happen. And it could preempt a constitutional crisis. Now, that's a phrase we hear in relation to Trump, a constitutional crisis, and it sounds very serious, and I'm sure it is. But I'm not sure what it actually means. I mean, if they just tough it out and don't do anything, what really happens? I don't know. So, constitutional crisis we're talking here, but the question as we speak is, will Trump fire Rosenstein? Will Trump fire Rosenstein? Okay. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'm curious, very curious. Let's see. Now, I think this is such an important issue, I'm going to do a full Celtic cross on this. Okay, with the Celtic cross, we start with the 3 cards. The signifier, the King of Wands. All right, now we've had the King of Wands often. So, just reminding you, wands are fire, essential fire energy and willpower. The King of Wands, either an extremely sane, compassionate, well-directed person, or the opposite of that. So, in this, at this stage, early stage of this part of the reading, is it the good King of Wands or the bad King of Wands? So, is it Trump or is it Rosenstein? Affecting this issue or representing the issue, the Fool. Okay, this is somewhat clearer. This to me is, if you like, the foolish aspect of Trump. Most presidents, even if they in anger or on impulse wanted to fire this man, they wouldn't. They'd listen to their legal counsel. But he is a fool, so the really scary thing and the really high risk thing at stake for America in relation to this topic is he foolish enough to do it? Oh, wow. And here, crossing that energy, is the Strength card. Now again, it's very early on in the Celtic cross, so it could be the conventional interpretation of strength, meaning the system is strong enough to resist the Fool. So let's hope that is what is symbolized there, but we'll see more. At the root of the reading, I love tarot. Again, you have the Fool, and the root of this quintessential reading is the Knight of Wands, the impetuous one, the one who doesn't listen to reason, whose sword is so big it actually leaves the card. So someone with too much power for their stage of development. So indeed, I see that as Trump. So at this point, now we've got 4 cards, I'm seeing these 2 as the more sobering cards of influence. I'm seeing this more as the legal system and Rosenstein, and I'm seeing this as the strength of the American system. So let's hope it's strong enough. Recent past. Yes, this is the merchant figure, the trader, the commercial figure, Trump, who has always just had things his way. He's got things easily, he has the trappings, but he has his back to the emotions. All those cups, a lot of emotions, and to a certain extent, we mustn't forget with Trump, although he has the maturity of a tadpole, he is still nonetheless very emotionally driven, almost exclusively emotionally driven and ego driven. So that is also very Trump-esque. The overarching card, the Knight of Wands, and that's interesting in juxtaposition to the Knight of Swords. So Wands, willpower, but much more contained as a figure. So this I would take in relation to this reading as the legal advice. Now, for those of you who have followed my readings and know how appalled I am at the Trump legal team, who themselves are really one step above mobsters and criminals themselves, Nonetheless, I take this to be the voice of legal caution. But he's a fool, so will he listen? Okay, the very near future. Da-da, ding-a-ding-a-ding, little fingernail drum roll, the death card. So, is that the death of Rosenstein, meaning Trump will do it, or the death of Trump's idea of being able to do it? Not quite sure yet, but it's dramatic and it's coming. And it's fairly compelling in the seriousness of it. So, how does Rosenstein see this? Because he's sort of a bit of a, well, let's put it this way, he's a figure who's hard to get a grasp on. He's not the most scintillating personality, but that doesn't mean he hasn't got a fine legal brain. The King of Cups, he, I think, in this sees himself as the King of Cups, having control of his emotions. He must be stressed out, he must be freaked out, he must be fucking angry. And he's really keeping a lid on all that. Now, acting on that, the hands are tied. Victim. Now, I'm finding with this reading, this can happen with the nature of a question with the tarot reading. Is this Trump with his hands tied, or does Rosenstein feel his hands are tied? In any event, I think because we're dealing here with Rosenstein, I'm going to say it and think he feels he can't do any more to protect his own position. His hands are tied. So he has to rely on the strength of the system to protect him now. It's out of his hands. It's another way of looking at the hands being bound. It's out of his hands. The environment of this reading, yes, I'm starting to see a theme and get a bit of a stronger feel for it. Temperance. So cool heads are prevailing at the moment on this. So I think a lot of people, probably many more than we realise behind the scenes, are working on hosing down the fool, including his own legal team. So I think there is an atmosphere of temperance and moderation going, please do not do this, Donald. The short-term outcome being the lovers, and when you're not dealing with a romantic couple situation, this is interpersonal relationships. So what this says to me at this point is the good guys are winning. I don't normally like these binaries in life, but because we're dealing with such profound absurdities, excuse me, you're forced into these binaries. So in that sense, I would say the good guys are winning. But what's happening after the short-term outcome? Ace of Cups, which we just had in the last reading, and more conflict. So what I take from those two is, I think a lot of people have been working with each other. I think what the interpersonal relationships with that, I think advisors, legal people, top weight politicians, even the slimy grubs, and I include in that General Slimebag Kelly, I think they are all working very hard with each other to keep the fool in check. This is not good for the Republican Party, and even the most partisan wankers must know this. I think they think it's all right, all the good and bountiful things. They think he's not going to do it at this point. They've put enormous work in pointing out that this would be potentially the end of your presidency, Mr. Goldfish Brain. And they think it's okay. But I'm a bit concerned that the final outcome still represents conflict. In this context, though, what I'm seeing here is it can be literally one person, or it can be a small number of people taking on a large number of people. So I think this is the voice note, not the actual persona of Trump. This is those in the Republican Party who are still going to keep up the bitching and the whining and the moaning and want to see the end of the Mueller investigation. So that's how I'm going to read this as an outcome card for you. Okay, well, it's so good to be back. So what I'm going to do is I'll release this video, and then I found a video that I did not long before I left on Bernie Sanders. This might sound a bit out of the loop at the moment, but I feel really passionately, not so much about Bernie the man and whether he continues in politics. It's Bernie and the ideas of whether he can actually still sow the seeds of those ideas and someone else run with them in the midterms and beyond. So that's why I'll be following this up with the Bernie Sanders. So think of it more symbolically. So good to be back. Send me comments. Love you all. And I'm back doing more readings. Bye. See you.